Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
All across the fantasy universe, welcome one and all to the Fantasy Football Hustle, powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm Brian Drake of FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always, you know him, you love him, the analytical assassin, PFF senior fantasy analyst, Mr. Dwain McFarland. How you doing on this 4th of July weekend, Dwayne?
Man, I'm doing good. It's hot. It is very hot in Texas right now. So we've got a burn ban. So people are not going to be able to shoot their fireworks. My son Landry's actually working at a fireworks stand. So like,
oh, really?
Yeah. So dude, he's working some long hours. Like, he's got to work today, I think from 2 to 11, 2 in the afternoon to 11 at night. And then he does that again tomorrow, I think.
In Texas, do they allow you to use, I'm sure Texas, I assume allows anything. Like, is it just crazy fireworks?
Oh, in Texas, yeah, like you can just launch like an RPG missile into the air, It's like,
I live in New York. You can buy like sprinklers. That's it. Or sparklers.
Yeah.
That's sprinklers.
Yeah. But the silver lining, I guess, of the heat is like, it's so hot. I don't have to mow my yard right now. I have to just water it, Drake. I'm like just trying to keep it alive. But yeah, man, it's a good weekend. Me and Amanda and Zoe went to see went and saw Elvis last night. It was actually pretty good. At first, I was kind of like, I don't like the way they're doing it. That, they're doing the things kind of like this montage of cutting to all these different things, to kind of set up, and I was like, man, if this whole thing is just going to be kind of like jumping in and out of these little stories of here's what happened in Elvis's life, like you couldn't connect yet with the characters or anything. But then like once they kind of got it all set up, which took like an hour, then they really got into like the movie and the storylines and everything. Some of that stuff was really, I guess, just it's tough to set up a backstory, for a career that like was as amazing as like what Elvis's was. But yeah, Tom Hanks was really good. Good show.
Nice. I sat around watching Money in the Bank and tested positive for COVID. So, hooray me!
Yeah, I know. We've been texting. I'm like, dude, just so everybody here knows, like Drake is such a trooper. Like, I'm like, dude, let's just forget it. Like, let's just do it like some other time. He's like, no, we got to do it. We got to do it.
I woke up sweating. Literally came down into my basement here to do the show. I had a hoodie on. And then as we get prepared to do the show, I've now taken the hoodie back off. My wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, we got to put out the content, man. We got to do the show. And at least I can talk today. So yeah, we'll be good. Don't worry about me. But today we do have some really fun stuff going on because we're going to talk about Dwain's most drafted players. He's been grinding away to become, as friend of the show, Evan Silva said just a week or two ago, quote, Dwain is a top 3 fantasy football analyst on the planet. Well, kids, if Mr. Silva is saying that about our guy, you might want to pull out a notepad and take some freaking notes today because we're going to be dropping at all the positions the players Dwain has the most exposure to, a little theory on best ball drafts, why he's taking certain guys. We're going to talk about schedules. Dwain has a killer article over at pff.com about that. We'll get into that in a little while. And you're also drafting not only on Underdog, but on DraftKings. I didn't even know, maybe this is poor of me as a fantasy expert, quote unquote. I didn't even know DraftKings had best ball.
Yeah, I mean, Underdogs is absolutely our fave, but right now, like, so the way I'm looking at it is I'm just trying to mix things up, number one. But number two, it's full PPR over at DraftKings, right? So Underdogs half PPR. So that changes things a little bit. It kind of gives you some variety, keeps things interesting. So that's one aspect of it. The other part is like we have a lot, over at PFF, we've got a lot of folks that play on DraftKings. So I feel like if I'm going to really be able to give advice about playing on these different platforms, I should be playing in them. I just believe in having skin in the game. And at the end of the day, like the reason I'm in the job I'm in now is just because I love playing fantasy football and I've loved playing for a long time. And so it's also just enjoyable. I want to draft as much as I can on as many different platforms as I can. FFPC is the other one that I love. So that's, tight end premium. So 3 kind of, different, very different scoring formats, really. You got half PPR, full point, and then you've got tight end premium. So yeah, I feel like if I'm going to be able to help folks win their leagues, I need to have skin in the game. I mean, that's the basics of it.
There's no better place to practice for your home leagues this summer than over at Underdog, and we want to help you by giving you an instant deposit bonus. If you go over to Underdog Fantasy, use our promo code HUSTLE. We're going to give first-time depositors up to $100. You put in $100, Dwain and I are going to match it. We're going to give you $100 too. There's $200 to draft best ball teams with over at Underdog. Use promo code HUSTLE. It's the best deal in the business, folks. Everybody out there's got a promo code. HUSTLE is the one you want to use. Use promo code HUSTLE. We're doubling your instant deposit up to $100. So let's talk about some of these teams here. We're going to start with the quarterback position. And I've got all of Dwain's rosters here in front of me. I've got the percentages of who he's drafted. And at quarterback, your highest owned quarterback thus far is Kyler Murray, who you've drafted 50 plus teams. Kyler Murray, you've taken 15 times. I know you're really high on him. You've talked about him at some of the shows we've done already this summer. Why are you so high on Kyler? Why do you keep pulling the trigger on him? Is it just a scheme? You love the Cliff Kingsbury offense, or it's just where he's fallen you in drafts?
Yeah, and just for clarity, so this is over, I think what I sent you is over the last 35 drafts, and those are all DraftKings. Okay. Over 50 teams I've drafted, yes, but like that's including, what I've done over on Underdog, what I've done over on FFPC. So today and it's still pretty Kyler's my most owned quarterback, period, my most rostered player. So, yeah, there's a few things. Like, number one, look, it's an archetype thing, right? These are not just specific player takes. Kyler Murray, if you have to pick one player in the NFL that has the best chance to throw for 5,000 yards and rush for 1,000, it's Kyler Murray. It is only Kyler Murray. And so he belongs to be in the same tier as Josh Allen. Josh Allen is not going to rush for 1,000 yards, easily going to throw for 5,000. We could easily throw for 5,000. We're going to project Josh Allen for far more, not far more, but quite a bit more passing yards. He still should be the number one quarterback off the board, but I have them in a tier together. I've had them in a tier together since March. Like this is not just a player take. Again, this is about, if people have been listening to Fantasy Football Hustle, we've talked forever about roster construction. We've talked forever about archetypes of players and how they fit into your roster construction. We've talked about risk tolerance. We've talked about opportunity costs, adaptability, all these different things that we've been talking about forever. And we'll sprinkle some new things in that we've been, we're learning from, the best ball community. But with Kyler Murray, man, it's just about the rushing upside plus the passing upside. If we here's the thing, Drake. If Kyler Murray had one fully healthy season by now, this wouldn't even be a conversation. He would be going in the third or fourth round of these drafts, and you can get him in the sixth round. So it's a perfect storm of the archetype of what a league breaker looks like. You can argue Kyler has the best weapons of his career. Marquise Brown is an upgrade over Christian Kirk. Marquise Brown does not get enough respect. Like, he profiles very similar to a lot of the really good receivers. Has he had his drops? Yes. Has he had his moments? Yes. But guess what? Drops are really not a sticky stat over time. Typically, they just kind of come and go. And so I'm not gonna pit that against Hollywood Brown, but he's a guy that can win at every level of the field. He can beat you over the top, and we've seen Kyler Murray use Christian Kirk that way. He can beat you underneath. The Ravens really started scheming him more in the underneath and in the intermediate game, and he can take one of that to the house from anywhere on the field. So that's an upgrade. DeAndre Hopkins was hurt all of last season, pretty much playing with Murray before he got shut down. He had a shoulder injury that he suffered in week 2 that basically rendered him, useless for 3 weeks. Then he comes back, then he pulls a hamstring. So DeAndre Hopkins wasn't really there, and Kyler ended up getting, dinged up. So the way I look at it, after 6 weeks, you'll have a fully healthy, Hopkins. You're going to have an upgrade in Hollywood Brown. You're going to have Rondale Moore, who they should be keeping on the field, in their 11 personnel. He can give you something underneath. James Conner was a plus in the passing game. And here's the other thing. 56% of the games that are scheduled to score 50 points or more right now over at Superbook between week 1 and 17 in the NFL season, 56% of those games belong to the AFC and NFC West. Kyler Murray's schedule is freaking fantastic. Remember last year how the Cardinals started, Drake? Pretty slow. Like, they were winning games, but they were not scoring a lot of fantasy points because they were leading. They were destroying the other team. That's not going to happen this year. The Cardinals open with Kansas City, 53-point game total, Las Vegas, 51.5, and the Rams at 50.5. They have 7 such games on their schedule, Plus, they get to play San Francisco, who's projected to win 10 games. There's just a lot of things to like about the Cardinals. They also get Denver, another 10-win team, right? They have a lot of quality matchups where they're going to have to score points. They're not going to be able to hold back. So Kyler Murray in the 6th round is an absolute smash. And guess what? You're getting him where other people are sitting there thinking, well, I'll take Elijah Moore. We like Elijah Moore, right? I'll take, I'm just trying to think right now, like I'm looking at the ADP, I'm pulling it back up around where, and Kyler right now is going at pick 62. Typically, I'm not reaching for him. I'm getting him maybe a little before ADP, at ADP, sometimes up to 10 spots after ADP. I was in a draft the other day, Drake, where I got Marquise Brown fell to the end of the 4th round. I was picking at pick 2. I took him. Then coming in the 5th round, I took someone else. Coming back in the 6th, Kyler Murray fills like 10 spots past ADP back to me. And then I was able to also still get DeAndre Hopkins like 10 picks past ADP. So Hopkins and Murray right now, like you don't have to reach to get access to them because a lot of people get scared away by the first 6 games on DeAndre Hopkins. And if you're adding him to your team as your 3rd or 4th receiver, and now you look up and you've got Kyler and 2 of his weapons, Zach Ertz, is one of the tight ends we're trying to target. That's like kind of where the cliff starts at tight end. So there's just so many weapons that you can also stack with him. But Murray right now, other people are looking at, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who we like, J.K. Dobbins, Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper, Adam Thielen, all players that are fine. But those players are not winning you your damn league. Kyler Murray can win you your league. He can be a freaking death blow. And we don't have to look any further than just looking at what he's done when he's been healthy, right? It's not like we have to imagine this into existence. The only thing we need is a healthy season from Kyler Murray.
And if you want more insight on that schedule breakdown, you go over to pff.com. Dwain has it up there. He wrote the article. It's called 12 NFL teams to correlate and stack to win in the regular season and championship rounds. Hey, if you want to get a little break on the PFF subscription, I'm going to give you a secret. Promo code HUSTLE. That's promo code HUSTLE. We're going to save you 25% off a PFF subscription. There is no better place to prepare to kick ass for your fantasy season than over at pff.com. Dwain, Ian, Nate Yonke, all the great guys over there are putting out killer fantasy content. Use our promo code HUSTLE. Save 25%. Get all of Dwain's content. Besides here at the Hustle, all his written work there. Trust me, it is the best in the business. If Evan Silva is saying it's great stuff, like we said to start the show, you guys should be taking advantage of that also. Some of the other quarterbacks that you have a lot of shares of, 33% of your rosters include Derek Carr and Russell Wilson. Again, we're looking at AFC West guys. It's the same story, right?
Yeah, it's the same story. And Derek Carr, man, like he is an easy play. If you grab either Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, or Hunter Renfrow, or 2 of those, it's pretty easy to stack Derek Carr. You can get him in round 8 or 9. And a lot of times, Drake, I'm drafting 2 of these quarterbacks in the first 10 rounds. Not always. Sometimes I'm waiting until the later rounds to grab a different, second quarterback. You want to mix up your strategies in best ball. But when it falls right, like I'll take Kyler Murray, and then coming back, sometimes, in round 9, I'll just go ahead and take Derek Carr if I've already got one of his top weapons, right? I'll do the same thing with Russell Wilson. The beauty of Russ Wilson is once you take him, there's still other options going after him from his own team that you can still get. You can get Albert Okwuegbunam, who's a great upside tight end. You can get Tim Patrick, who's going to be on the field probably more than Jerry Jeudy, who's also flashed in his underlying profile that he's a potential breakout player. He's finished as a wide receiver 4 twice, but his PFF receiving grades and his targets per route run, those things all suggest that he can actually be more of a player than that. So like where some people are taking Alan Lazard and hoping that MVS can turn into something out, like I love pivoting away from those things and saying, hey, 2 rounds later, I'll just take Tim Patrick, who now got a major upgrade at quarterback, is going to have to play in that same division. So with Carr, there's nobody to take really after him. There's a player we'll talk about at running back here in a minute that's probably going to surprise people that I have a ton of rostership over on DK2. But yeah, I love those players, because of the same reasons.
You have very little exposure to guys like Matthew Stafford, who you haven't drafted at all, and you've only pulled the trigger on Aaron Rodgers and Joe Burrow once. What's the story there?
Well, I've wanted Stafford. It just hasn't worked out. I don't reach on these things, okay? Now, if I set up a 2-player stack, let's say I start up with Darren Waller at the beginning of my 4th round, And let's say I come back and let's say I took Devontae Adams at the end of the first or beginning of the second, then I will reach a little bit on Derek Carr. But whereas ADP is falling, like you don't necessarily have to. If I set up a two offensive player, stack with the quarterback, I might reach. Otherwise, I'm not bothering with it. And so part of it is, if you look at Cooper Kupp, I just don't have a ton. It just hasn't worked out for me with my draft position. It's not that I don't like Cooper Kupp. I do like him. I just haven't been able to get I've not drafted from the 2 spot very much. I've not drafted from the 3 spot that much either. I've mostly, or the 1 for that matter. Like I've drafted a lot from the 4. I've got a little bit exposure at the 2 and the 3. So if I get Kupp, like I'm willing to go after Stafford. I'm also willing to tack Stafford on because he does play in that NFC West. I'm not against it. It honestly has just been the way drafts have worked out. Who is the other one that you mentioned?
Rodgers and Burrow.
Rodgers. I'm just down on Rodgers this year. Like, I mean, Devontae Adams is gone. Like, Alan Lazard doesn't profile as someone that's going to break out. Randall Cobb is old. Sammy Watkins is an 18 to 20% target, share guy. And I'm fine with that. Christian Watson, is a raw rookie. I like Watson. My one draft where I took Rodgers, I think I took him in round 11 and around 10, and I immediately turned around and I grabbed Christian Watson with the next pick. In fact, I remember that draft. I waited on quarterback. It was like round 8. I took Lance, then I took Ayuk in 9. Then I came back with Rodgers in 10 and Christian Watson in 11. Right. So I wanted to create those stacks, getting those guys late. I'm fine with Rodgers when he slides. The positive is there are a lot of guys you can take after he's drafted. You can get Christian Watson. You can get Robert Tonyan. You can get Sammy Watkins. You can get Romeo Doubs or Daubs, however you say it. Don't know. Should probably go listen to an announcer to say his name just so I know and act like a freaking professional. But there are options there that you can pair with Rodgers. Also keep in mind, like if you take Aaron Jones in round 1 or 2, I immediately put Rodgers over my queue just so I don't forget him. Again, it just hasn't necessarily worked out, and I'm not that high on Rodgers this year. But the Stafford thing, definitely, I anticipate that my rostership will increase around Stafford.
Let's move to running back, where it's seemingly the forgotten position in best ball. We know everybody loves hammering wide receivers, but you still need good backs to win. And your strategy has you taking a few guys over and over, led by Javonte Williams, who's on 41% of your rosters.
Yeah, so with Javonte, again, this is an strategy, right? This is an archetype pick. This is not just being in love with Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams is a fun player to watch on film. And if you listen to like some of the film experts that I love the most in the industry, like Jay Moyer, Matt Waldman, they'll tell you that, Jay Moyer, that Javonte Williams actually has issues, that they're worried about his vision. The way I look at it, and I agree with those things. When you go watch, like you'll see it. I'm not the expert those two guys are. But when I go watch the game and then I see, oh my God, but look at how many tackles the guy breaks. Look at how elusive he is. Look at how often he creates explosive plays. He's a plus in the passing game. Just like, we assume certain players may become better in other facets of the game. Like, what if Javonte Williams, all of a sudden, everything does click for him and the vision and everything is there? Because here's the thing we know. His offense is going to be way freaking better than it was last year. He could catch last passes and be a far better running back just because we know that the Broncos have to score touchdowns and they've got a quarterback to do it. So the way I look at this is Javonte Williams, it's an archetype. He's checking all the boxes I want except one thing. What's the one thing? Oh, they brought Melvin Gordon back. So yes, there is some uncertainty about how big of a role Melvin Gordon's going to play. And I'm not going to pretend to have the answer. I'm speculating that Denver iced Melvin Gordon, right? They basically told him, and this is in the media. You can go read this. They said ahead of all this, look, we like Melvin. We basically told him, go play the market. Come back to us if you can't find what you want, and we'll see what we can do. No one wanted Melvin Gordon, right? I don't want to say no one, but obviously no one came to Melvin Gordon with a blockbuster deal. They signed him to a 1-year deal for like $2.5 million. And the word out of camp early on, is that like this really could be Javonte's backfield. So yes, you're having to take on some uncertainty here. With Javonte Williams, but the archetype is the right one. It's the same archetype as Jonathan Taylor last year. I didn't have the exposure I should have had to Jonathan Taylor last year. Now, part of it, again, this all comes back to opportunity cost. Jonathan Taylor was going at the end of first rounds at the beginning of the second round. last year, right? We're talking about the early to mid third round here for Javonte Williams. I'm not reaching this 41%. I've taken him one time in the second round, and it's just the way a certain draft fell. And I had Jonathan Taylor, and I wanted to make sure I got to pair those two players together. I want to make sure the turn pick didn't screw me, because I'd let him go by one time before with Jonathan Taylor, and the damn turn pick took Williams. In the other draft where I got Jonathan Taylor, J-Dub went in the middle of the second. So I at least wanted to make sure that I had one draft, right, where I got to pair JT and Javonte Williams. And so all of these picks have come basically right at ADP or at a discount. And here's the thing. So the profile, the archetype is there. That's what we're betting on. It's not just Javonte Williams. His archetype is one that we want to bet on. It's a roster construction thing, Drake. If you're picking from, pick 2, 3, or 4, there's a lot of ways you could start, but you could easily have started with Justin Jefferson, right? And come back and maybe say CeeDee Lamb or Mike Evans has fallen to you. I've had that start and turn around and then get to take a potential league crushing back in Javonte Williams. So again, it is a risk tolerance thing. This may not be for everyone, but here's what I will say. This is the same profile tag that I gave to Todd Gurley in 2017. It's also the same profile tag I gave to Kareem Hunt in 2017. And I was way over the market in exposure. Rarely in the first 3 rounds am I this far over exposure versus the market on any player in the first 3 rounds, because look, there's a lot of good players, and I anticipate this will go down. I don't think I will be stuck at 41%. We'll talk about that in a second. But there are certain profiles where you do it. And even if you say you started with CMC, and you come back and grab a receiver in Javonte, but there's just so many ways to make this work. And again, if it hits and all of a sudden Javonte is a 65%, snap back, dude, in this offense, Brian, with this schedule, he could be the RB1 overall. I know we could say that about a lot of players, but the percent chance, like the probability that it could hit for Javonte if he gets the role, is huge because of how talented he is. I mean, again, he profiles similarly. His underlying data profiles similarly to Jonathan Taylor, to Nick Chubb, to Kareem Hunt. Like, that's how good of a running back this player is. And if his vision all of a sudden comes together, now you got Russ Wilson, he could be the number 1 running back in all of fantasy football. And again, remember, you could take T. Higgins here, and that's a safer play. And I love T. Higgins. You could take Tyreek Hill here. I like Tyreek Hill. Here's the big problem that I have with that and why I'm leaning to Javonte. And it's all because I just want to destroy souls, Drake. I want to, I want a chance at the very top outcome. And I'm not saying you can't get there with those players. But if you just look, since 2011, right? We typically don't get very many players that are going to score at least 22 fantasy points, right? And that's really elite. But of those, running backs make up 68% of the players that did it. Wide receivers, 32%. So when you're truly talking about league crushing seasons, which that's kind of the threshold I start looking at, it's just the running back is it's the easier way to go. And if they check all the boxes, not just any running back, this running back is checking a boatload of boxes that you want them to check. If you bump that up to 25 fantasy points per game in a PPR, 80% have been running backs, only 20% have been wide receivers. Can wide receivers get there? Yes. But the way I'm looking at it is Javonte has a chance to be a true league crusher. So that 41%, that's where it comes from. Now, here's what I'll say. If Javonte all of a sudden, I'm anchoring my rostership on Javonte now early, because if things go well in camp and if all of a sudden the vibes are Javonte's got this backfield,
he's a first round pick.
He's going to move to the first round. Some people say, oh man, I'm not doing it, Melvin Gordon. And Melvin Gordon's a good player. But at that point, I'll actually agree with them. I won't have to draft Javonte at the end of the first round. My exposure will then just level out anyway, and I'll be at like 20%, 15%. But all my rostership will have come when I could get Javonte in the early to mid third round. Dude, I've gotten Javonte at pick 11 in the third round. Like, wow. Talk about like, I'm like a damn dog. Like, I'm like just sitting there salivating. Just can't wait to like click the button, And again, it's about the profile. It's not just, because I'm a Javonte Williams stan. We're not stans of anyone. We're stans of winning big money. That's what we're trying to help people do. So yeah. And I know we've spent a long time on these first 2 players, but I think they're really important because they're anchor players for me so far. And here's the thing with Javonte. Let's say news comes out that it really looks like it's gonna, it's nothing is differentiating of Javonte. I don't think his ADP has much room to go down, but let's say it did. Then it's fine. I'll continue gaining some more exposure to Javonte, and basically I'll use that to balance out, right? Maybe where I spent a pick that was more costly than what other drafters will get. I'll just balance that out by taking him later. Then ultimately my main risk will be if Javonte gets hurt. If Javonte gets hurt, right, you never really want to be in a situation where 40% of your rosters could go up in flames with an injury. That's the reason, like, I don't see my rostership staying at 40. But again, if ADP is to slide downward, it's going to be tough. Like, it's a risk that I will probably just go ahead and take on this year. And even then, like, I probably will get it down to like 30%, somewhere in there, a little bit more reasonable, just because, I don't, week 3, I don't want to be like just completely, I don't want to be like bummed out for the rest of the season.
Talking about guys who could see a major bump depending on what we hear in training camp, you've got a lot of shares of Saquon Barkley and Travis Etienne, two guys who we know can catch the football out of the backfield, but they're kind of on shaky offenses. But again, if they get all these touches, and that's what we're looking for, volume is king here in fantasy football, they could have really productive seasons. So quickly, what do you think about Etienne and Barkley? Why are you clicking them so much? Probably in rounds 2 and rounds 3.
Yeah, Barkley's my RB7. Ultimately, I would be willing to take him at the end of the first. I've had a couple teams where I've just taken Barkley at the end of the first. Like, I don't like, reaching a ton, but he's the type of player I want to create a bunch of different rosters with, right? So if that means taking, Barkley and Swift, Barkley and Lamb, Barkley and Evans, Barkley, insert name, right? Barkley and Aaron Jones. Like, I want exposure to all of those different combinations of Saquon Barkley. For the most part, I've gotten him at or below ADP so far, but he is a player that I've been willing down at the turn. I've had the turn a ton. Like, I've had pick 12 more than any other pick. So it's one where I've mixed it up a little bit. And I try not to overdo that because you can change the way your draft looks, right, in the later rounds. It doesn't all have to come, in the early rounds, but he has a good enough profile that I want to go after it. Here's the thing. 25 years old, has elite pedigree. Last year, fluke injury with the ankle after, was just working his way back from that gruesome knee injury, an ACL plus meniscus that he injured in week 2 of the season before. It was just getting going, Drake. It was like a 20-point outing, a 25-point outing. Boom. Dallas Cowboy Jordan Lewis steps right in front of him, not knowing.
Scumbag.
He's looking one way, Barkley's looking the other. The play's over, and Saquon steps on Jordan Lewis's foot, just twists it. And you folks remember, it was like a damn grapefruit. Like, his ankle was huge. But anyway, like, still a young player. That was a fluke freak accident. I'm not worried about it. More importantly, the doctors that we listen to on Twitter, Edwin Porras, like one of my faves, not worried about it. He loves Saquon Barkley's profile. And if it's good enough for him, a doctor of physical therapy, it's good enough for me, Drake. And all I need to worry about then is what's the profile? Back to the archetype. Explosive playmaker. Could some of that be lost? That's the question with Barkley. But a pass catching back, Drake, in a wide open backfield. And guess what? If you have that role, it doesn't matter if you're on a crappy team. What is CMC? How many years has CMC been on a good Carolina Panthers team?
Right. And these guys aren't sharing the football. That's the key.
Exactly. Going to be out there 75 to 80% of the snaps. Going to catch footballs. Still young enough that explosive profile could all of a sudden still be there. And we're like, oh my God. Barkley could finish as the RB1 overall as well. Dude, I've got teams where I've started with CMC, Barkley, and Javonte Williams. Talk about freaking elated. I've had that same start and taken T. Higgins in round 3. That's how I diversify off of Javonte, right? Then it's like, okay, great. I've got this start once before. This time, let's throw T. Higgins on it, because that's another player I really love, but at wide receiver. So, yeah, love Barkley. Etienne is climbing, and he should. Etienne was an elite pass receiver in college, PFF receiving grades. Again, I respect Jay Moyer. He talked about him. He's not as big on Etienne. He thinks he's got major challenges. Here's the way I look at Etienne. Jay felt the same way about DeAndre Swift last year too. And I agreed with that. And guess what? DeAndre Swift's PFF receiving grade and rushing grade totally backed Jay up. Like, it was terrible last year. But at the end of the day, he was on a losing team and he had the passing down role. We're talking about a PPR format here. So the archetype is still right. And if all of a sudden Etienne turns out to be a better player than what we think, right? Or he improves in the areas that Jay has pointed out that he's got issues with, then all of a sudden, guess what we have? We have a top 6 fantasy player. So I'm just buying in. You've got a chance that Robinson starts the season on the pup. If Edwin Porras, said that basically 10 to 15% of what of Robinson's, ability you can immediately shave off after the Achilles injury. This is a late season injury. There's a chance that, we hardly see Robinson at all this year, right? And if in the third round, Drake, in a PPR league, if you just think that ETN is going to get 40% of the rushes, that's not a lot, but he's going to handle the passing down work. He's going to pay off his ADP in the third round. So he has upside from there. If all of a sudden he destroys in the first few weeks as Robinson's still getting going and he just takes over the whole role, now you have upside from your round 3, and you have a player like DeAndre Swift last year, before he got hurt, right, that was operating as a top 6 running back, and you're getting them in the third or the fourth round. Right now over on DraftKings, he's going, and similar for Underdog, going at the end of the third, early fourth. And so it's absolutely a profile that I want to be in on. If I miss Javonte and I'm really looking running back, in the third round, Travis Etienne is the answer. That's the name that I like to click the most.
If this is getting you guys excited to play some best ball, go over to Underdog Fantasy, download the app, use our promo code HUSTLE. It's going to get you an instant deposit bonus up to $100. So you put $100 in, you put $50 in, whatever it is. Use promo code HUSTLE. Dwayne and I are going to match it. You're going to have a great time all summer long. Let me talk about some guys here who many would consider maybe low end or backup type backs. But if they hit, it's really wheels up for cashing. And some of the guys I'm talking about here, Cordarrelle Patterson, 37% ownership. Isaiah Spiller at 52%. Jamal Williams, 48%. Rashad White, 52%. Tyrion Davis-Price in San Francisco, 56%. And your number one owned back, this would be a great trivia question. If we should tell people in the chat, who do you think Dwayne's number one owned back is? It's my brother from another mother, Kenyon Drake, who is on 70% of your rosters here. Holy moly. Do you just see Drake and you just assume it's me? You just click on it like, oh, I like that guy.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's because I love you.
You're just drunk at the time and it's late in the draft. Like, sure.
Yeah, so we'll just start with Kenyon Drake since we're there. It's the AFC West. He has the best receiving profile on the Raiders, so I think he has a role on the Raiders no matter what. Zamir White, this is Josh McDaniels' offense. So I think what we're looking at here is you're going to have Josh Jacobs as the early down banger. You're going to have Zamir White as kind of the reliever of that, a la Ramondre Stevenson last year. And then you've got somebody playing that Rex Burkhead kind of jack of all trades role, or potentially the James White role. And I think that's Kenyon Drake. So I think Kenyon Drake gives you in a PPR. I do not want to draft Kenyon Drake in a standard league. If you're in a standard league, just forget about him, right? And again, this is a 20-round draft. I'm taking Kenyon Drake in round 19 or 20 of 75% of my drafts, basically. And what does it do? It lines up with that AFC West, NFC West stack. I've got high exposure to Derek Carr. I've got Derek Carr on 30% of my teams. Almost every one of those, I have Kenyon Drake. So it's just an easy way to add another pass catcher. It's also an easy way if you're looking at, let's say you started with San Francisco, but you didn't get, because the other Raiders you have to draft kind of by round 7, right? Devontae Adams is a first rounder. Hunter Renfrow is a 6th to 7th rounder. Darren Waller's a 4th rounder. So if you're looking for a passing option, say the San Francisco game blows up in week 17, and look, for it to blow up, San Francisco's probably, whatever. Like, let's say they run the ball a lot. It's hard for the running back on the other side to blow up unless they're a passing down back, unless they can explode. And here's the other thing. We don't know anything about Zamir White yet. What if Josh Jacobs goes down? If Josh Jacobs goes down, it could very easily be Kenyon Drake really as the lead back and Zamir White just complimenting him as an early down guy. It could be an even split. But Kenyon Drake, again, archetype, pass catching back that has shown explosive playmaking ability in the past. And you can get him in round 18 or 19 of your draft. You can take him in round 20. I get him in round 20 a lot, Drake. That's the other part. So again, ADP is right. There's no opportunity cost taking Kenyon Drake, right? I mean, you're not battling anything else. There's not really any risk, with it. It's just a roster construction move and gaining access to those high potential shootout games.
I love Zamir White. And there's actually been some talk that Zamir White could come in and take over this role from Josh Jacobs, who, if you guys follow contracts, Josh Jacobs did not have his 5th-year option picked up. by the Raiders. This is a new
Zamir
regime.
White is not taking over for Josh Jacobs. I would put, unless Josh Jacobs gets hurt, like I'd put 10 grand on that. I would put 10 grand on that.
That's some stuff I heard out of the drum beats in camp. Well, we hear a lot of crazy stuff.
Whoever said that's an idiot. Josh Jacobs is a really good running back in the NFL. Like he is a great, I don't want to say he's great. He's really good. Like if you look at his underlying metrics, Zamir White, if he can sniff anything Josh Jacobs has done, it will be good. Look, and I've got 25% exposure to Zamir White. I like him, but what you need for Zamir White to hit is you need Josh Jacobs to be hurt. And Zamir White's not going to take passing down role. And you got to spend a 15th round pick on Zamir White when you can get Kenyon Drake in around 18 or 19. If you're in a standard format, Zamir White is probably the only other Raider I'm drafting after Josh Jacobs. Zamir White's not taking over for Josh Jacobs. It's just not happening. It doesn't matter that they didn't pick up his contract. To me, that just says, well, fine, go run him into the ground. Like, what do you care? Like, he's still the better player. So I do like Zamir White, though. I want to be clear that I'm fine getting exposure. The reason I don't have as much exposure to Zamir White and some of the other guys that we're about to talk about, like Isaiah Spiller, Jamal Williams, Rashad White, Tyrion Davis-Price, some of these others, is I think no matter what, if Jacobs goes down, he's still got to deal with Kenyon Drake, and that's going to be a problem. So yeah, let's talk about some of these other guys you mentioned. We'll start in order of ADP. So Cordarrelle Patterson, it's just really, again, an archetype. Still an explosive playmaker, doesn't have a ton of wear and tear. Yes, he's older, but you can get him in around 8 or 9 of your draft. Guess what? He also has a week 17 stack against the Cardinals. I have a ton of Kyler Murray. I have a ton of DeAndre Hopkins. I have a ton of Rondell Moore. I've got quite a bit of Zach Ertz. So there's a lot of opportunity there for Cordarrelle Patterson to serve as my week 17 game stack. He is an explosive receiving back, and he has very little competition right now in the backfield in Atlanta. And he's a top 3 weapon on the Falcons. It's not a good team, but again, ADP is taking care of the math for you. People are just passing on Cordarrelle Patterson, so I'm happy to take him. Isaiah Spiller, 56% of my rosters have Isaiah Spiller right now. I think Isaiah Spiller has spike week potential even with Austin Eckler healthy. That's how he's a little bit different than some of these other guys. Because we know that they don't want to give the full workload to Eckler. Last year, Eckler had a career share of the rushing attempts at like 54% for the team. They're going to want to keep him around 50%, keep him heavily active in the passing game. The thing I love about Spiller is he can come in and he's got to deal with who? Larry Roundtree and Joshua Kelly. These guys have done nothing. They've done nothing. Isaiah Spiller would have been a second round pick if he didn't run slow at the combine. And the combine is one of the most overrated things in the NFL. The biggest impact it has is that it impacts draft capital. Draft capital, we know, does tie back to you getting an opportunity. So Spiller's a 4th round pick, not someone we would normally be that crazy about, but he plays in the AFC West, plays on a great offense. He gives you backdoor exposure to the Chargers. The Chargers play in the Rams. So say you got Cooper Kupp in the 1st round and you didn't want to spend the hyped up price to get Keenan Allen at the beginning of the 3rd or Mike Williams in the middle of the 3rd. You missed on all that. Spiller can make a nice fit. And even if you don't have the stack against the Rams, it's the damn AFC West versus the NFC West. And if Austin Eckler goes down, Isaiah Spiller has shown us from a very young age in college that he can actually play in both phases of the game. Archetype. We're talking about archetypes. We're not just talking about players. We're talking about guys that fit the profile we want. He can catch passes. He can run between the tackles. He can do whatever they want him to do. He broke out at a young age in college. He is only 21 years old. He's the youngest guy in this draft. And you can get him around 13 or 14. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, that is a great value. And again, this is DKADP, not necessarily that cheap. Like over on FFPC, you got to spend like an 11th rounder to get your arms around Isaiah Spiller. So, it'll change by the format you're playing in. Rashad White, similar Drake, doesn't have the same path, I think, to spike week potential. Because Leonard Fournette really showed us he can be an every down back. And Lenny's just got a sneaky receiving profile. Has been over 20% targets per route run every single season of his career. Like, the only other guys to do that are like the elite receiving back. So we don't normally put Lenny in that category. But Fournette has grown as a receiver. Tom Brady trusts him. So I think Rashad White, there's more risk with him because also Brady could just not like him, and be like, stay up. Sorry, you're not seeing the field. Like, Brady has, if he does that, then Rashad White's an absolute zero.
Yeah. If you can't pass protect, you're not going to, they're not going to put him out there with Tom Brady getting caught from the blind side.
Pass protecting. It's knowing it's being assignment sound, but it's also knowing how to run your hots.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think we're at a point where we overrate pass protection. I do believe it matters, to your point, for long down and distance, meaning it's 3rd and 12. You're probably not checking the ball down to your running back if you're actually trying to get the first down. Brady's only going to check it down to the running back if he sees I'm more likely to throw a pick than get the first down here. Fine, I'll give Rachaad White a chance. In those cases, a lot of times the running back's asked to block first, then release. But if you're running a 2-minute offense and you're trying to keep the pedal to the metal to destroy your opponent, which the Bucs do, or you're trying to catch up, right? And if Bucs are in catch-up mode, obviously they're going to be throwing the ball. In those scenarios, like the running backs really don't block that much. They're running routes. They're quickly getting out on the route, and it's just because you just want to go as fast as you can. Fine, they're running a cover 4, everybody's drop back, boom, going to just jump it down underneath. Running cover 3 over the top, boom, just going to drop it down underneath, and then just eventually waiting for the team to then be like, fine, we're going to cover the flats to get Rachaad White, and then run a cover 2 or something, and then boom, Brady's going to hit you between the safety and the corner. So for me with Rachaad White, he could carve out some of that receiving role, but man, if Leonard Fournette goes down, it's the Bucs, man. It's the freaking Buccaneers. And again, back to these schedules. It's not just the AFC West and the NFC West. That's the easy part. But the Buccaneers have 7 games right now on their schedule that are supposed to go over 50 points. And guys, these things are not rocket science. A lot of these game totals, people are probably thinking, man, look at them this early in this year. Does it matter? They're not going to change much. It's about quality quarterbacks playing quality quarterbacks. When you go look at all these matchups, that's mostly what these things are. They're teams that run at a quick pace, and they're teams that have good quarterbacks. And so, like when you look at the Bucs, it's against Dallas, Dak Prescott, Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes. Atlanta was a weird one. 51 points. That's an end of. There's some kind of edge Vegas has about this now, and they also are a big favorite, like in that one. So, the Rams, Matthew Stafford, San Francisco is supposed to win 10 games. Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, Arizona, Week 16, Kyler Murray. The Bucs have a loaded schedule, one of the most pass-happy teams in the league that could scale back a little this year based on what's happened with some of their weapons. But we still have Tom Brady. We know when they can, they're going to keep the pedal to the metal. Absolutely freaking love Rachaad White. Again, remember archetypes. He fits the pass catching. He's not going to give you that spike week outside of it. I think he and Spiller are actually mispriced. Spiller should go before Rachaad White. Instead, it's Rachaad White that goes before Spiller, because I think Spiller can give you similar upside if Eckler goes down, but he can also give you points, even if Eckler doesn't go down. I think for Rachaad White, that's going to be a more difficult task. So let's say you start off 0 RB, and then you come back in like round 8 and you grab a guy I want more exposure to, Kareem Hunt. It just hasn't worked out. I think Kareem Hunt, the sneaky part is, what if he gets traded? Like, could you imagine where would Kareem Hunt go, Drake, if he got traded to the Bills tomorrow?
He would go in the 2nd round.
No, he would go in the 1st round.
You think?
He would go in the 1st round. Yes. He would go in the 1st round of fantasy draft. He would be a top 6 fantasy pick. His underlying.
And there's a very good possibility of that when you look back at what the Browns are doing here. You've got Kareem, like you said, you've got Kareem Hunt. They're never going to extend his contract. You've got Nick Chubb there. They've got Dearness Johnson. And then they went out and they drafted a kid this year also. There's no need for them to have this dearth of running back on the roster. I mean, you're probably not going to have a quarterback, so you're going to be pounding the rock left and right. But if someone came to you like the Bill and they said, we'll give you a 3rd round pick for Kareem Hunt, why wouldn't they do that?
Yeah. And that's the thing people are forgetting. Like, they don't need to trade Kareem Hunt based on the salary cap. They have a ton of room, right? But where it could happen is this, to your point, someone come, and I think that's what it would have to be. It would have to be a 3rd round pick. The Browns are going to be fooling themselves, and they knew this when they signed Deshaun Watson. That's why they only gave him $1 million in year 1. They knew there was a good chance of this happening. Whether we agree or disagree with it, let's leave all the off-field stuff aside, and we're just talking about what's going to happen between the lines. So do they really think they can win just by being a running team? Maybe they could. They have a really good offensive line. They've got a great scheme with Stefanski, but Jacoby Brissett is not taking you anywhere. And Baker Mayfield wants out, and he's probably not taking you anywhere either. So unless they decide to patch things up with Baker, which would give them a better chance than Jacoby Brissett, I just don't. I think the Browns have to look at this and go, we have given away a brickload of picks to get Deshaun Watson. We need to get as many picks back as we can. We have to find a way to infuse other talent into our roster because we are tied to Deshaun Watson, and we do not have draft capital moving forward in the first round, at least, right? So I think 3rd round is what it would have to be, though, because you think about a compensatory pick. A compensatory pick is usually at the end of the third round. So if you could get an early third rounder, which is a big difference than a late third rounder, I think that could do it. A late second rounder from a team they think that is good, aka the Bills, I think that could also do it. So I think the Bills could get into camp if for some reason they get in, they see James Cook is not cooking, right? And they want this passing down back. We know they've tried to replace Devin Singletary multiple times now. Just hasn't worked out. Man, like Kareem Hunt would go off the rails he could again, I know we've said this a few times, but again, this is not just saying it about any running back. Archetype, people. Kareem Hunt has the archetype. Explosive, absolute explosive playmaker, way above expectation versus the rest of the NFL. And he's got an elite passing down, profile. If he lands on the right team, look, Kareem Hunt's a top 10 back right now. There's a lot of teams Kareem Hunt could land on, and he would absolutely just basically make the other person worthless on the roster, right? Like I'm just looking at the thing right now. Like, if he landed with the Rams, he would render Kareem. He would render Cam Akers basically useless. If he landed let's look at this. Like if he landed. All I'm looking at right now are like the really good teams. So it's I would need to look at some of these other teams. But like if he landed Atlanta, obviously he would be the lead back right away. If he landed in Kansas City, no one would even remember Clyde Edwards-Helaire's name. I don't know they would go back to the well with him, right? But he like light years better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, not close. So I mean, there's a lot of potential outs here for Kareem Hunt if he gets traded. It could end up being a bad trade to a team where we're like, wow, this sucks. But what team is really going to trade for a running back today in the NFL unless they think they're good? Like that's the way kind of my brain's thinking about it. So anyway, I want more access to Kareem Hunt. Where were we, Drake? Like when I went off on the Kareem Hunt tangent. I know we still got to talk about Jamal Williams. We talked about Rachaad White, Tyrion Davis-Price. I'll hit on these other two real quick, right? So Tyrion Davis-Price, similar profile to Rachaad White. I don't know how much he can give you unless Elijah Mitchell gets hurt. But here's the other caveat. Shanahan has shown a propensity for multiple years to all of a sudden just flip the switch, Drake. We don't know why. All of a sudden, Elijah Mitchell's in the doghouse, Tyrion Davis-Price into the lineup. Was also listening to Evan Silva and the latest podcast they put out over at ETR. And Evan thinks there's a good chance that Tyrion Davis-Price really could just take over and be the lead back anyway, because he's really built to be that more between the tackles, downhill kind of runner. They did spend a third round pick, and they could really put Elijah Mitchell back into more of that jet role, right? Fast guy, outside zone, get him a little more involved in the passing down work like we had seen Matt Breida in the past. We've seen Raheem Mostert play that role in the past. So, when Silva talks about stuff like that, like definitely gets me thinking. So maybe there's a bigger path to Tyrion Davis-Price having a role in the 49ers than what I'm giving him credit for. It just really comes down to ADP. Man, you're getting to deal with the NFC West again, and you're getting a guy in around 15 or 16. Where will we rank Tyrion Davis-Price, Drake, in week 14 if Elijah Mitchell's hurt?
Right, exactly, which Elijah Mitchell is prone to do. I mean, he's a top 12 back.
Right. That's what's good. So again, you're buying into an offense that you love the run scheme. You're buying into an offense that gets to play in a loaded schedule. They're going to have to score points. You're buying into also, just a chance, right, that Tyrion Davis-Price could actually carve out a bigger role than we think, and you can get him in round 15 of your draft, round 14 of your draft. So like if you guys are starting out 0 RB, like there's a lot of ways I think to get there this year that are pretty rich. And they're younger backs. You're not having to like think too much. So here's the last guy, Javonte Williams. No one's talking about Javonte Williams, but again, it comes back to DeAndre Swift and some of the challenges, honestly. Jamal Williams. Sorry, Javonte Williams. Oh, sorry, yeah, Jamal Williams. You're right. Yeah, sorry. Javonte, we've already talked about. Jamal Williams, Detroit Lions. And it comes back to some of the stuff like that Jay Moyer had pointed out with DeAndre Swift. And it really did come to fruition. Like PFF, rushing grade, receiving grade. DeAndre Swift was terrible last year. Now he came through with explosive plays, got to play in the passing down role. So still the profile that we like. But when you have a profile like that, and even though he's got the first round capital, like there is a chance, right, that we see DeAndre Swift's role reduced. Here's a couple ways. One, it could just be a performance thing, right? It could be a performance thing. Two, it could be if the Lions take a step forward and they're a better team. In those game scripts, DeAndre Swift did not get as much work. Jamal Williams got a much more equal share of work. Here's the other thing. Jamal Williams has proven in the past to have what? Archetype pass catching role. Not an explosive playmaker, though, so he doesn't check all the boxes. But he's shown he can work on all 3 downs, plays on an offense that could be ascending, has a guy playing in front of him that the front office wants to give every chance, but has shown cracks. There are cracks in the profile of DeAndre Swift from a talent perspective. He, again, pass catching guy, great. But honestly, I'd rather take Travis Etienne this year in the 3rd than Javonte Williams at the end of the 1st. I'm getting exposure to Swift because of the profile, and I want it. And I know that, again, just like what we talk about with Javonte Williams, what if he puts it all together? Like he has the ceiling of being an RB1, right, overall. But when I have someone that I trust that really watches film, and then the data is also backing it up, it's kind of a double strike, for me with Swift. And I'm lower than the market on Swift. I don't have a ton of exposure to him. Again, I'm working it in where I can. But Jamal Williams, dude, you can get in round 16, round 15 of your drafts. So I think there's a lot of outs for Jamal, not mentioning injury. And Jamal Williams could really come through for you. And it's a player that nobody really wants to click on. If for some reason you've got Justin Fields, who's a nice QB2, it gives you a week 17 stack. Not as juicy as some of the other guys we talked about. But again, I have 48% exposure to Jamal Williams right now. Not one I expected to happen, but as I really started digging into it and studying the profiles, he's a guy that I ended up being overweight where I thought I was going to be.
And remember, too, they've got this old dinosaur play caller there, breaking kneecaps and all that. He had 9 games last year, and I know Swift got hurt, but 9 games last year for Jamal Williams where he had double-digit carries, and he can catch the ball. Too. Remember, week 1, he had 9 targets, and he caught 8 of those. So, yeah, he can definitely.
Dude, he's a plus in the receiving game.
You're and remember the beginning of last year, they were talking about, like, we're going to split this down the middle. Like, we want Jamal Williams on the field. They went out and paid him to come over from Green Bay.
And Anthony Lynn's gone, so maybe they won't do that this year. Anthony Lynn is the classic 1A, 1B, 1A, 1B, old school, right? Just hearkening back to the Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler, days. And so the hell, we can go further than that. The Danny Woodhead days, if you remember those, Drake. But those were probably before Anthony Lynn. So anyway, yeah, Jamal Williams, just a player to remember. It's not just any other name. Like if you need running back help, right, and you're in rounds 14 and 15, don't be afraid to click on Jamal Williams.
Looking at wide receiver, and I mean, obviously, it's the most drafted position in best ball, so it's tough to go through all these guys, but there's a couple of theories I kind of want to run by you, Dwayne. So looking at all these wide receivers, we also have to talk about the quarterbacks because, as you and I have been harping on all offseason here, don't get overloaded with players on shitty teams. And that also means don't get a bunch of wide receivers with quarterbacks who stink. So this leads me back to guys like Deontay Johnson, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, who you can get on your roster and you say, hey, look, I got all these kind of high-end guys. And then you realize 6 weeks into the season, these guys never freaking score because the quarterbacks are dog shit.
Yeah, it's something that and we've talked about it even in previous years, but this year the real trap is down at the one, if you're starting from picks 9, 10, 11, and 12, there's a real trap down there of where you could all of a sudden look up and you're through 7 rounds and you've got, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Elijah Moore, and Deontay Johnson, right? Deontay Johnson, his quarterback's not even being drafted. Half the time in 20-round drafts, his quarterback doesn't get drafted. Part of it's because nobody knows who it's going to be, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at DK Metcalf, neither of his quarterbacks get drafted. We don't even know who they are. So this isn't Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think you don't necessarily have to be as harsh on because number one, his ADP is better, and Jared Goff has actually supported 2 top 24 wide receivers with the Rams twice, 2 top 36 wide receivers every season he was with the Rams. So we know Jared Goff can at least do it. Is he going to crush fantasy leagues? Probably not. But can he support your weapons? Yeah. We don't know that with Deontay Johnson. We don't know that with DK Metcalf. We don't know that, to your point, with DJ Moore. So the way I'm handling these players, they crush from a standpoint of talent. Talent is the number one thing we want. But these are pretty unique cases, Drake, versus what we've seen in the past. Usually it's a player like that, and we're like, well, and they, for example, they have Jared Goff, right? It's like, it's not as good as having Patrick Mahomes, but man, the talent's still going to win out. We're talking about a player with DJ Moore that's right now scheduled to catch passes from Sam Darnold or Matt Corral, a 3rd-round draft pick this year, right? Not good. Not good. Like, and what is our hope? That he could maybe get Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo? I mean, this is not good, right? Now, that would be an upgrade enough. One of those two would probably be an upgrade enough that the talent profile could still come through. You know, when you look at DJ Moore, he's a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Period, folks. Like, he is a top 5 receiver, and if he were to ever get to play with an elite quarterback, he would crush fantasy leagues. But you know, he's the new Allen Robinson, really. You know, I feel bad for DJ Moore, but the way I'm handling him is I never take him at ADP, and I absolutely never, ever, 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 ever reach, ever. I just take him past, and guess what? It works out, because especially if you're drafting from middle position and you still want to get access to the talent, there's an outside case he finishes as a wide receiver 1, and it would come through absolute efficiency. Guess what? Great players that have repeated great seasons like DJ Moore has had, eventually they just have a season where everything breaks their way and they can crush. Now, he could still come through with that wide receiver 1 finish, but the way I like to look at him, but it would be very hard. The way I like to look at him is, okay, I love this talent profile. Same with DK Metcalf, same with Deontay Johnson. But guess what? One of those 3, every draft I've been in when I'm drafting from the middle position, falls back to me, Drake, in the 5th round. I don't have to take them in the 4th round. These are guys that have wide ranges on their ADPs because people are rightfully scared, and they should be scared of drafting these players. So Deontay Johnson, I get in an average of 8 picks past ADP. DJ Moore, I'm getting in an average of 7 picks past ADP. DK Metcalf, I've only got 1 share, and I got him 12 spots after ADP. So I'm not taking them at ADP. I don't need to. Honestly, I treat Gabe Davis the same way. Gabe Davis plays in the elite offense, but the talent profile is super shaky. So I don't ever draft Gabe Davis at ADP. And you're going to eventually land in a draft, folks, where you got a bunch of people that think Gabe Davis sucks and that the market is overhyping him. Guess what? That's the draft I draft Gabe Davis, and I get him in the 5th round. I've taken Gabe Davis 1 time at the end of the 4th round, which was still like 5 picks after ADP. So on average with Gabe Davis, I'm getting him like 6 or I don't have it right in front of me. I didn't look at it for the show, but I want to say probably 5 or 6 spots after ADP. So again, that's the way I'm treating all of those guys. Elite talent profiles for the first 3 that we talked about. Just the quarterback situation is not just bad, it's terrible. Terry McLaurin was in that bucket before with the contract thing. And look, Carson Wentz is not good either, folks. So you could make an argument that he belongs in a similar bucket, but we've seen Carson Wentz support fantasy production before. It doesn't have to be great, but Michael Pittman had a wide receiver 2 finish last year, right? We've seen Alshon Jeffrey have a nice season, with Carson Wentz. We've seen Zach Ertz have nice seasons with Carson Wentz. So with McLaurin, his ADP is going to be on the rise, but he's another player that I was just letting it fall to me, hey, fine, I'll get him 7 or 8 picks after ADP. So if you're going to do a lot of drafts, that's what I would recommend. Probably won't be able to do that with McLaurin now, because now what's the newest news cycle? He signed. He got a big contract. And all of a sudden people are like, poof, like all the other problems are gone that McLaurin's got, because it's just the latest thing in the news, and that's all people can focus on, because we're in the end, Drake, we're all just like bugs, and we're just flying towards that like light, that's going to like shock us and like kill us. And so that's where folks are at now on Terry McLaurin. But anyway, that's how I'm handling those guys. You're on mute, Drake.
That's because I'm coughing up a storm over here with my COVID. So looking at some of the guys that you have a lot of exposure to, we don't have to get into all these guys, but you're big into Marquise Brown. We talked about that before. And then guys on good offenses, KJ Hamler, we mentioned that before. Rondell Moore goes along with your Kyler Murray stacks. Zay Jones, talking about Derek Carr. So you like these guys. Tim Patrick, you've got a lot of exposure.
Well, Zay Jones is Jacksonville now.
Okay. Sorry, he's not there anymore. You're right.
COVID Drake. And again, that one's a construction thing. If I just feel like I've got a ton of upside in the mid rounds for my receivers, and I just need someone that maybe in the early weeks could just give me something, then it's like, and you're in the last round, you're like, is there a starting receiver available? The name is Zay Jones. Not going to win you a league, but it's more of a roster construction thing. Like, right, can it just stabilize me? Maybe could because Zay Jones give me 1 week or 2 weeks out of the first 5, where he just keeps me from being a complete zero at receiver, while I wait on, maybe I took DeAndre Hopkins as my wide receiver 3, who's suspended for 6 weeks, but my wide receiver 4 and 5 or upside younger guys, right? That could take a minute to get going. So that's really where Zay Jones comes in.
And you have been pulling the trigger on DeAndre Hopkins more than 50% of the time. You had him on 14 rosters here, so you're not afraid to get DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, never reach. People, you just land in drafts where people all of a sudden decide can't take him. Everybody will still take Alvin Kamara, even though he's probably going to get suspended for 6 games or more at some point this season. I don't know if I can say probably. Like, we could bring on Drew to talk about that, but like, he punched a dude multiple times. There's video on it. That's the thing with the NFL, Drake. When there's video, Now his lawyers are doing everything they can to push it out, but who knows what that could mean? What if he gets to start the season, but eventually is suspended in the season? So people are willing to take Alvin Kamara in the 2nd round still. But nobody wants to take DeAndre Hopkins in round 7 or round 6. I get him in round 8. I've got him in round 8. Like, it's insane. Again, AFC West, NFC West. And by the time we're trying to win big money in these tournaments, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be on your team. And like you mentioned, I do have a lot of Kyler Murray. Last thing I'll say on Hopkins, I don't know how much we can count against him for last year. He is in the age window where the drop-off could just hit. It definitely could. But he was hurt all season. We talked about it earlier in the show. He was playing hurt, and then he got hurt again. Then they eventually shut him down with the MCL. So I don't know how much you can count DeAndre Hopkins last year. I don't know how much you can count this, but I went back and actually just looked at the games where he was healthy and didn't get knocked out of the game or wasn't playing hurt. He still had a 23% target share in those games. So I like Hopkins. He can be tricky, man. So for example, if you start your team, and let's say, I talked earlier about how sometimes I'll grab the 2 quarterbacks, right, by round 10. And if you've already taken a tight end as well, like maybe in the first 5 or 6 rounds, which means you didn't, you're going to be a little lighter on receiver up there. And you take Hopkins as your wide receiver 3, that can get tricky because how are you, the first 6 weeks of your season, your receivers are probably pretty weak. Actually, some of those teams, I have Hopkins as my wide receiver 2. So you got to make sure that you come back in those. You got to be willing to pass on some other things. You can't need everything in rounds like 11 through 14. You got to be willing to get committed because there's a little pocket there of receivers that you can go after to help offset not having DeAndre Hopkins. And honestly, DeAndre Hopkins is where a lot of the Zay Jones stuff came from as well.
Are there some players out there that you want more access to that you haven't been able to draft yet, but knowing how many more teams you're going to draft over the summer here, like, who do you want more access to?
Yeah, real quick before we hit that, I want to name, just so folks know, with the receivers, I won't go into extreme details around these, but the guys I have at least 25% or more: Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Adams. I've got Curtis Samuel, and Curtis Samuel's easy to stack with Carson Wentz because no one wants Carson Wentz. It's one nice thing about Wentz, man, is you can add stacks for him later, right? Jahan Dotson going later than a lot of the other first round rookies. But Hunter Renfrow, I love 37% on him. Jalen Tolbert, 30%. There's no reason to draft Michael Gallup, folks. There's no reason. He's probably not going to be back till mid-November. And even then, like, how healthy is he going to be? He's going to be at risk of re-injury. Nice player, but for where he's going, right? And if his ADP slides, we can readjust. I would just rather take Jalen Tolbert, 2 rounds later, probably the starting wide receiver 2 for the Cowboys over the first, 2.5 months of the season. And by then, could just have the role locked down. Jameson Williams, 30%, he's a guy that you can get, later because people are worried about the injury. Again, be careful. It's tough if you want to take Jameson Williams plus DeAndre Hopkins and say you got Alvin Kamara. Like, you might be good late, but guess what? Your season may already be over, right, before you even get there. Marquise Brown, I'm at 37%. A lot of that does tie back to Kyler. Rondell Moore, 44%. A lot of that ties back to Kyler. Russell Gage, trying to push his ADP up with every draft I do, Drake. Got him 33% of the time. Absolutely love Russell Gage. Sky Moore, 33%. Tim Patrick, 48%. Again, when you get Russell Wilson and you don't already have Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy, you can come back with Tim Patrick and Albert Okwuegbunam. And then Wan'Dale Robinson, 41%. Second round draft pick. A lot of smoke around Kadarius Toney. On one side, tantalizing potential talent profile. On the other, could be a player the team just doesn't want to put on the field For whatever reason, this guy, coaches and Kadarius Toney do not get along. And this is 2 regimes in a row that this has been happening with. So Wan'Dale Robinson could easily find himself playing the slot receiver, the role that Cole Beasley and the role that, we've seen Isaiah McKenzie play well in. Now, we don't have Josh Allen, so you got to lower some expectations there. But there's enough questions in the Giants pecking order that Wan'Dale Robinson come through as a second-round draft pick that nobody wants to touch. Nobody wants to touch. And you can easily stack him with Daniel Jones. So having said that, the players like that I would like to get, more access to, absolutely. We already talked about one, and it's Kareem Hunt. So right now, essentially what I'm doing everywhere I can, instead of taking Cordarrelle Patterson, I'm just starting to take Kareem Hunt. Just because the more I think about the chance that he gets traded, his ADP is not going to go down, Drake, no matter what. Like what would send Kareem Hunt's ADP down rather than an injury? The only way I think it can go up, the only way I think it can change is if it goes up, and that's if he gets traded. Mm-hmm. And it could go up significantly. We're not talking about a guy you can get in the 8th round that's going to now go in the 7th. We're talking about a guy going in the 8th round that can move all the way to the 1st round of fantasy drafts. So Kareem Hunt is a player I'm going to prioritize. I'm going to be willing to reach, a half round, and every time he falls to me at ADP or below when it makes sense for my build, going to definitely be pulling the trigger on him. I want to get my Darrell Henderson rostership up. Again, AFC West team. It's a backdoor entry with the Rams. You kind of have to be careful with some of these backs because typically, big running back games don't correlate necessarily well with shootouts, right? From the opposing team. A lot of times when the lead running back from one team does well is because they're crushing the other team, and the other team has bad fantasy performances from their wide receiver 1 and 2 and 3 and so on. So, but still, it depends on the way an offense is built. Was listening to JJ Zacharysen's pod the other day. He did a great pod just talking about regression candidates at the team level. One of the things he talked about was how often the Rams threw the ball inside the 5 or maybe inside the 3. I can't remember the exact stat. You guys go listen to JJ's pod, but basically, we could easily just see the Rams flip that. And all of a sudden, that's good for Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson if he's the guy that's out there. Again, AFC, NFC West stacks there. Another guy at running back that I want more Melvin Gordon, Drake. And people are going, well, wow, you love Javonte. Again, archetypes, not just tied to players. We're talking strategy here. So a great way for me to hedge. I don't want Melvin Gordon when I have Javonte Williams. But when I don't have Javonte Williams, I've only got him 19% now. Melvin Gordon 19%. I want to get that higher because if I do miss on Javonte, that means Melvin's coming through in a way that we like, and the ADP is fine. You can get him in the 9th or 10th round of your fantasy drafts. He does go after other players that project for a little bit better roles overall, I think, right now. But the upside for Gordon, if Javonte Williams goes down, is he's going to be he'll be an RB1, right? So those are the ones at running back. I'm sure there's some I'm missing here. But then looking at quarterback, you mentioned some earlier. I want to get access to Stafford. And a couple other guys, since people didn't, that we didn't talk about earlier. I'm already at 22% on Justin Fields. I'm at 20% on Trey Lance. I'm at 22% on Brady. So I'm good on those. I only have one Lamar Jackson team so far. But a big part of it, Drake, is opportunity costs. Where Lamar goes in that early 5th, there's still a lot of other skill position players I'm very interested in. By the time you get to Kyler at the end of the 5th or in the 6th, there's been a teardrop across a lot of those skill positions. And so Kyler, it's like I just don't take Lamar that much, but I need to do it because I like Lamar. He's my QB3 in my overall ranks. It's also harder to stack Lamar, right? You can get Mark Andrews down in that, if you have a pick in the first 4 picks, you could easily get Mark Andrews in the 2nd round and come back with Lamar Jackson as your early 5th round pick. I need to do that. I need to also get more exposure to Mark Andrews. I don't have any at this point, Drake. I have 0. Mark Andrews and Jalen Waddle, really carried my fantasy season last year. You have to have players that you're getting, that you think the market's lower on, that you really think have a good chance to hit, and you need to have high rostership of them. And those 2 players were Andrews and Jalen Waddle last year. So I definitely still need to get more Andrews. We didn't talk about the tight ends, but do you want to hit any of those, Drake? Like any of the rostership on those?
Yeah, I was gonna get into that. Your most owned tight end is Tyler Higbee. Gerald Everett's also a guy you're fairly high on. Zach Ertz, 30% of your rosters. Like you said, you don't have any Mark Andrews. You haven't been pulling the trigger a ton on Travis Kelce, 19%. So what's kind of just your overall plan? I think people would be interested in that. What's your plan for tight end in these best balls where it's not tight end premium? It's just, again, you're just trying to get, your best roster out there. And, if you're passing on an elite tight end, it's because there's other great options there. And obviously you're finding some love in the later rounds for the Higbees of the world, Gerald Everett, Darren Waller, 30%. He's fallen from where you could get him last year. So what's your plan overall at tight end?
Yeah, I'm actually 19% is pretty high for Kelce, considering you have to spend a first round pick. That's 1 in every 5 drafts. I'm taking Travis Kelce. So that means a lot of the time when you get down to picks 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, I'm pulling the trigger on Travis Kelce. The thing I love about taking the tight end early, there's a couple things. Number one, if and when you hit, it's a big differentiator versus your competition, right? Because most other folks will not have anything like Travis Kelce at their tight end spot. So it's an immediate positional advantage that's hard to replicate, at some of the other spots. And Kelce, yes, he will be going into age 33 season. But we've seen tight ends be able to play longer than other positions and still really be good. And even though Kelce,
how does he not smash this year? He has to. There's nobody else on the team.
Yeah. And look, MVS, questionable profile that shows no signs of being a breakout other than he gets to play on a good offense, right? Juju Smith-Schuster, declining talent profile. I want to get a little more exposure to Juju. I've probably been a bit harsh on him because if somebody else from the Chiefs is to hit outside of Sky Moore and Kelce, I would say Juju is my next most likely. So when Juju slides past ADP, side note, I'm willing to get on with Juju some more. And a lot of that does just go back to look, the Chiefs are scheduled for the most shootout games on the season. But with Kelce, again, AFC West, NFC West. So you've got your tight end position taken care of. You've got the division you love. If Patrick Mahomes slides, I will be willing to stack him with Kelce. I don't have that stack yet. Just hasn't worked out. But I've seen Mahomes in some different drafts just slide 20 picks. I've got one share, I believe, of Patrick Mahomes, and it was 20. It was like 15 to 20 spots past ADP. And again, this comes back to you can get Kyler, Jalen Hurts, Tom Brady, all these guys that actually profile very similar to Patrick Mahomes. You can get them a lot later, and it's easier to stack. It's not easier to stack. Actually, that's wrong. Mahomes is pretty easy to stack with his guys. I just don't like the talent profiles of some of the guys that go after him and Kelce. So yeah. Kelce, he have 25, 30% target share this year. He's never, it's in his range of outcomes. So we're not just trying to force it to him. This is a good player that's proven he can earn targets. So this is not like we're just trying to wish it into existence. But yeah, after that, I'm fine with Mark Andrews. The problem is I got to take Mark Andrews over, Mike Evans. There's a lot of guys, we probably need to talk about Mike Evans at some point. I've had to give in. I'm very concerned about certain things in Mike Evans' talent profile. But at this point, with Rob Gronkowski gone, you're not going to have Godwin until mid-October or November. Antonio Brown is gone. It's where else are they going to go with the ball? It's going to have to go to Mike Evans. So at this point, you've got an elite player, an elite offense. I think, Evans definitely has more red flags in his talent profile than what people want to say. But with Gronk gone, that was the final straw for me. It's fine. If you want to take Evans in round 2, go ahead. But as far as the tight ends go, Waller, yes, Devontae Adams is there. Devontae Adams is probably going to get 25% of the target share, but I'm fine with that. Especially in best ball, fine, give me Darren Waller's 20%, and I'm fine if Hunter Renfrow gets 20%. If they're in games where they got to throw the ball all the time and they need to score a lot of points. So I'm fine with Waller, and it gives me access to the AFC West, NFC West. And again, it is still an elite talent profile. This is not just saying, oh, it's a tight end that plays in that division. This is a tight end that plays with a good quarterback, has the elite underlying profile, has natural macro correlation across all these other rosters that we want to draft from, right? And in week 17, you get a matchup against San Francisco. So with Darren Waller, it's just, again, also having that tight end in round 4, I don't have to worry about it in rounds 8, 9, and 10. Because there's a lot of shit you need to do between round 8 and 12, depending on the way you've built your roster in the first half of your draft. Gerald Everett, surprise, surprise. Another AFC West team could be as good as the number 3 target, for Justin Herbert. I don't want Gerald Everett as my tight end 1. Gerald Everett's my tight end 2 or my tight end 3. Same thing on Higbee. He just falls, Drake. He just falls in drafts. And if I don't get back to the strategy, the overarching strategy question you asked, if I don't get a a Waller, if I don't get a Kelsey, I don't want to just have, 2 tight ends. I typically want 3. And so a lot of times it will be Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee, and come back with, you name it. It could be, and it could be Zach Ertz. It could be Zach Ertz first and then get a Gerald Everett and get a Higbee. It just depends on the way the draft falls, but typically I want 3 of those tight ends. But all my most owned tight ends come from that division. And Higbee, I don't want to be at 52% on Higbee. It's just the way the drafts have worked out. And it's hard to get access to the Rams. If you don't take Kupp in the first, you don't take Cam Akers in the 4th, Allen Robinson in the 4th or the early 5th, where else are you going? You've got Darrell Henderson and you've got Tyler Higbee. And I still want access to that offense because I know I'm going to have a lot of Chargers. And so I want a chance to have a blow-up game, in week 17. And I know there's a lot of potential shootouts, throughout the season for, those players. So again, want more exposure to Andrews. Kittle, I want more exposure to Kittle. It just has not worked out for whatever reason. But I will tell you guys, like if you're sitting in round 4 and you want to go ahead and get your tight end and you're picking from early position, picks 1 through 4, what I'm going to start doing with Kittle, because the wide receivers are so flat there, and I've done this. I've just taken George Kittle and let that receiver group we talked about go by. DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, Gabriel Davis. Guess what? One of them's coming back. One of them is coming back to you. You just play the math. There's not another tight end like Kittle. Kittle's it. Kittle's the tier break. So if you want to get that top tight end, and I get it, Kittle's going to be challenged for targets. But as Ian Hardis likes to say, if aliens showed up tomorrow and wanted to play a football game for the fate of the earth, the tight end we would all push forward to be like, this is our dude. It would be George Kittle. George Kittle is the best tight end in football. So his range of outcomes are still tight end 1 overall. They are still a smash season. Do some things have to go right for him? Yeah. I'm not drafting Dalton Schultz. Think he's overrated. You got to draft him too.
And you're a Cowboys fan saying that. So this isn't just.
The thing. Do I want to take Dalton Schultz or Kyler Murray? Which one is going to obliterate my league? It's not Dalton Schultz. I'm just going to tell you guys. It ain't. Like Dalton Schultz is probably going to be he could be a plus for your roster. So I don't want folks to take it wrong. It's just when I get to that spot and I'm like, like what's more replaceable for me to draft later? Find a Dalton Schultz or find a Kyler Murray? It's a pretty easy answer. It's a lot harder. You can't. It's a very much harder to find another Kyler Murray. We've got Fields who can run. We've got Trey Lance who can run, but they don't have the passing upside, right, that Kyler Murray has. So he's kind of a unicorn. But that's it. Like, and it's fine. Like if you want to throw Cameron Brate, some of these other tight ends that are on offenses that win a lot. Don't reach though is the main thing. I'm not reaching for these tight ends. I'm letting them come to me at ADP. I might pick them a couple of spots. When I say don't reach, I mean don't reach around. If you need tight end and it makes sense and it's 4 picks ahead of ADP, do it. Also understand your draft position. Everything's relative. If you're picking from the turns and you want to reach 10 picks, it's fine. That's different than reaching 10 picks when you pick in the middle of the draft. If I'm picking from the middle of the draft, I almost never reach 10 picks. Exception, occasionally, I have 2 offensive weapons from an offense and I want to complete my quarterback stack. But otherwise, I'm not doing it because I want to leave the option open for value just continuing to fall to me. And my favorite drafts, Drake, are the ones where I'm constructing the roster I want across these divisions I want access to, but I'm getting value while doing it. And those are the teams when you look at it at the end and you're like, oh yeah, this team has a shot at $1 million. Like those are the teams that you feel the best about. So be careful. You don't want to be reaching, but it is all relative. Like, so if I'm picking at the pick 12 and I've taken Trey Lance 12 spots ahead of ADP. Why? Because I look at my quarterback tiers and I'm like, there's no one left. And looking at ADP, by the time it gets back to me, all 4 of the guys I like are going to be gone. So if I want any chance of rostering 2, I need to take 1 now. And if I want to make sure I have 1, I have to take 1 now. Versus if I'm picking it, I'm at say position 6 in a draft and I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh, there's 4 guys I like. One of them's coming back to me. I could get extremely unlucky and it doesn't happen, but most likely one of them is going to make it back to me. And so again, know where you're drafting from. And that's why you want to be a little more aggressive when you pick from the turns, especially if your tiers are drying. And so it's okay to get a little more aggressive. You'll hear some people say, don't ever reach more than 10 picks. Like, It's relative, folks. It's relative. Yes, the numbers are going to bear that out. But again, like I would like someone to do that analysis when you're picking from the turns versus when you're picking in the middle. In the middle, you always want to leave yourself open for value. From the turns, you have to get a little more aggressive.
And finally, and boy, this has been some outstanding content. People in the chat are really loving it. Appreciate all you guys going over to YouTube, searching Fantasy Football Hustle and subscribing. Are there any guys that you continually pass on in drafts when they just, their name is up there and you're rolling through the rounds? You're just like, nah, I got no interest in this guy.
Alan Lazard is overpriced. MVS is overpriced. I've got my first share of MVS last night. I want to say he fell 12 picks. I still want to hedge. I realize I can be wrong, right? Alan Lazard, it hasn't worked out that way where, he's fallen. The dude's like in the 7th round now. It's stupid. Like 7th or 8th round for a player that has not flashed one single component of being someone that could handle a nice target share, right? I think his ceiling is probably like 18%. Targets per route run, never done it. PFF receiving grade, never done it. Yards per route run, never done it. He's never even been a wide receiver 4 in those categories. And now all of a sudden we think he's going to magically just be awesome. I just don't get it. Same thing for MVS. He's played with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, he's playing with Patrick Mahomes now, but he's played with Aaron Rodgers. And I get it. People are like, well, Devontae Adams got a 30% target share. Well, guess what? All you same people are saying now, Devontae Adams can't get a 30% target share anymore. Why? Because he plays with 2 good players, Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller. So what does that freaking make Alan Lazard and MVS? Bingo, not good players. So it's like, I don't have a lot of access to them. I definitely want to hedge. So where I can, when they fall in ADP, I'm going to be willing to get some exposure to those players. It'll be fine. But at the same time, I don't want to be overweight on them. Just scrolling through some of these names. In the 4th round, we've already talked about these guys. In the 4th round, I don't feel any sort of need or inclination to click on Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, or DK Metcalf. None. Take them in the 5th if they fall to me. But if not, I do not feel an inclination to need to draft those players. I don't know, Drake. I'm looking at my low exposure players. Some of these are just, it hasn't worked out right. Like Debo, I only have 4%. It's not because I hate him. It's just the way the drafts have fallen. I haven't been able to do it. AJ Brown, a guy that we've talked about, I've only got twice 7%. Again, the big challenge for AJ Brown is when he's on the board, a lot of times Javonte's sitting there. And it's just like, I can't take AJ Brown over Javonte Williams. Why? Because the upside for running back smash cases are just higher than wide receivers. Doesn't mean AJ Brown can't still come through. If people want to hear more about that, we talked a lot about AJ Brown on the last episode. I don't know, Drake. Is there any others you're seeing here? Do you have questions about any of these guys you're looking at? Like, dude, why the hell are you so low on these dudes? Why don't you have more? Or guys that maybe you just don't see on my list? Like Alan Lazard's not even on this list.
Yeah, I'm looking through,
like people will be like, oh, you only got 3 shares of Jonathan Taylor. Well, you have to have the first pick. So, right. I haven't had the first pick very much. And honestly, I've got 3 shares of Jonathan Taylor now. I've only had the number 1 pick once. So twice I've gotten Jonathan Taylor after the first pick.
It's the same story with Cooper Kupp. You've only taken twice.
Yeah. Breece Hall is a great one to talk about. I love Breece Hall. But the way I've started my drafts from a construction standpoint, when Breece Hall has fallen to me. So this is the other reason I love taking Javonte in the 3rd. Roster construction. Okay, we've already talked about the profile, the archetype. We've talked about risk tolerance, ADP, reward, risk. We talked about the opportunity cost, all that. The other part is roster construction. Let's say you start receiver. You start Cooper Kupp. You come back, you land Mike Evans. You're feeling damn fine. You come back in the 3rd round, you get Javonte Williams. You got your potential smash running back. All those players play on what teams that are in the Super Stack 12. You're feeling great about life. The reason I go ahead and take Javonte there versus T. Higgins in that build is because Breece Hall is my next target up that I know may have a chance to me in DraftKings to get to me in the 4th, but he's it. He is the one. Now, Cam Akers, I would take there as well. You get access to the Rams offense. The archetype profile is not as strong, but Cam Akers playing in a really good Rams offense could score a lot of rushing touchdowns, right? So those would be the 2, but Cam Akers goes well before that. So when you're building your draft plan, you can't say, well, I'm going to go ahead and take a receiver here, and I'm going to cross my fingers that Breece Hall or Cam Akers, the only 2 players I really like, make it to me, right? Because at that point, like your plan kind of becomes, if you go receiver, and you're coming back in the 4th round, obviously, like Marquise Brown could be a target if he slides. George Kittle, we've talked about. But if you're talking running back, like it's Breece Hall or Cam Akers or bust. So now if you're fine with that outcome and you're like, I don't care, I'll just take a receiver or a tight end. And I don't care about the 5th round, because guess what? There ain't a running back in the 5th round you should be taking. You need to go receiver, tight end, or quarterback again. And so that means you've started the first 5 picks without a back. And that's fine. You can do it. I've done it. I've built 0 RB teams and actually felt okay about them. But I will say, when you do that, Drake, you better be very committed to coming back in round 7 through 12, and you've got to pound those running backs. And we talked about a lot of guys that will be there for you later that could be those upside smashes. We hit on all of them earlier in the show. But that's my other thing with Javonte when I take him there. And I'll even take ETN at the beginning of the 3rd round if Javonte's gone sometimes, because I want to go ahead and get that one back, Drake. You could make an argument for James Conner there if you wanted.
That's the name I was going to bring up to you right there. We've talked about him before, and you've only drafted him once.
Yeah, and it's honestly been more scenario-based. I like James Conner. James Conner's a player that I pumped up earlier in the offseason. Got a lot of exposure to James Conner when he was in the 4th round when I was drafting. Now he's the 3rd round pick, and the opportunity cost thing changes the dynamics a little bit, just because I'm a little more worried about his injury profile, right? It's just a player that, when you look at what, the fantasy Twitter docs have to say, again, back, shout out Edwin Porras, amazing work. Like, that's a guy that he's a little worried about, and so I lean into those dudes. They're the pros, right? They're the guys that understand like which injuries we should care about more, which injuries we should care about less. And so in the 3rd round, there's still just enough other things for me. And here's the other part, right? I'm often drafting Kyler Murray and his receivers. So whenever I take James Conner, like, I don't like stacking as many Cardinals later, and it kind of blocks one of my potential paths on the way I want to build these super teams. So I really do like James Conner. He's a player that I need to up my exposure to, because I really do like him. But he's not the same archetype as Javonte Williams. He's not the same archetype as some of the other guys we've talked about. But you could also make an argument that, man, James Conner is Leonard Fournette a round later. Like that's the positive argument, right? He's arbitrage Leonard Fournette. You get him almost 12 picks after Leonard Fournette, and he's going to play in a great offense. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot. They're going to shoot out a lot, and he put up monster fantasy numbers last year without Chase Edmonds. So I definitely need to up my exposure to James Conner. But again, all that coming back to James Conner, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams. If you've started receiver, tight end, receiver, tight end in your 3rd round, those are guys that still give you that big smash upside. And then coming back, if you can get it, fine, you take Breece Hall. But there's a real good chance Breece Hall's not going to be there. And Breece Hall, I've noticed over like the last 10 drafts, and this could just be random, not a huge sample, but he's creeping up. And he's a player that I've got quite a bit of access on Underdog. So hadn't had to worry about it as much on DraftKings, but I need to up my exposure to Breece Hall. And one way to do that is just, if you're picking from middle position and you start receiver, tight end, or receiver, tight end, receiver, Breece Hall I feel much safer about knowing Cam Akers or Breece Hall will be there in the middle of the 4th round versus if you're drafting from early position, if that makes sense.
Shout out to the great Bob Harris, who was in the chat, football diehards. I was listening to Bob and Mike Dempsey, as I often do on the weekends, as they're starting their 5 days a week show on Sirius. I'm laying outside, Dwayne, around my pool yesterday in a hoodie. It's 85 degrees outside, and I'm laying there by the pool, not realizing why I'm sick, listening to Bob and Dempsey go over the NFC East. So always great stuff. I wanted to throw this at you. I'm the king of random trade / signings. We were talking about Kareem Hunt and where he could go. The Cleveland Browns have $41 million in cap space. They're likely to not have their quarterback for 12 plus games this season, let's say. Why wouldn't the Cleveland Browns make a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo?
I mean, I guess.
Think about that. You're going to play shitty Jacoby Brissett, or you can go get...
Can I tell you why? Because Jimmy likely isn't taking you anywhere either. You've put your chip on Deshaun Watson. Do you really want to give away more draft capital? You've already. But
how much are you really going to have to give away to a team that wants to get rid of him anyways? It's the same thing.
There's a reason Jimmy G hasn't been moved. One, people are waiting on the shoulder injury, but because the 49ers, their price tag's too high. And here's the thing. Shanahan is not going to let it happen because let's be honest, he's concerned about Trey Lance. He doesn't know what he has in Trey Lance. So I don't see the 49ers giving Jimmy Garoppolo away. Look, it could happen, and I think it does fit into the category of you definitely of wild crazy, but not one. And even then, like, how much does that really do for us? Really? I mean, what does that do for Amari Cooper? Meh. David Njoku, meh. Like,
I would think it's a big upgrade over Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett stinks.
But it's not enough to make me think. I'm not going to look back and be like, oh my God, I didn't draft Amari Cooper. They have Jimmy Garoppolo now. What am I going to do?
It's more of a real NFL move. Like, it helps the Browns in terms of could they make the playoffs or win their division.
Jimmy can support, at least Jimmy can support 2 fantasy weapons.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the Jared Goff argument, right? It's funny with Garoppolo. He never finishes in the top, but you'll look up and be like, well, yeah, look what he did. He got Deebo Samuel and George Kittle there. Oh, look what he did. He had Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle there, and a lot of it is scheme-based, obviously, with what they do with the 49ers, but Cleveland runs a very similar offense. So that's where I would see the biggest connection, right? You got a very similar offense, that you're running. Here's what would blow everyone away.
Kareem Hunt for Jimmy Garoppolo?
Kareem Hunt for Jimmy G.
That's the move.
Oh, my God. Kareem Hunt with the 49ers? Oh, whoa.
Where does he get drafted? Kareem Hunt? We're just speculating all over the place.
He'd probably be a 3rd round pick there. If he goes to Buffalo, he'd be a 1. If he goes to the 49ers, there'd be enough people, man, to trust Kyle Shanahan. Can't trust him. And there's some truth to that. And Trey Lance is going to run the ball a lot. Jimmy G's gone now. Trey Lance is going to get 30% of that rush share. And if you got to split up with Elijah Mitchell still as well, it's kind of like, did he really change that much from where he was in Cleveland? Like, I think you could make that same argument. But I do think he would move up, and here's the thing. People can't resist news cycles, Drake. Like, and a lot of it comes from fantasy content creators. Mm-hmm. They have to have something to write. So if there's a trade like that, it's going to be like, Kareem Hunt should be taken in the 3rd round. Like, that's immediately going to be like what's said. So, that would be a fun one. Like, if that trade happened. But for me, like with the Browns, like, even if they get Jimmy G, it's like, fine. It would make Amari Cooper fine at 80. I don't know. I have 0 shares of Amari Cooper. I just see 0, and I like Amari. Like, look, he's been on the Cowboys, like, great route runner. Never has been a 5-tool player, though. He kind of is what he is, 20% target share guy. 20% target share guy in an okay offense. If you get Jimmy Garoppolo, 20% target share in a bad offense if you don't have Jimmy Garoppolo. So it's like, I just don't feel like there's not going to be a scenario where I look back and think, man, I wish I had more Brown skills position players. Like, the only one I see is Kareem Hunt gets traded away and Dearness Johnson gets hurt. Then the argument is Nick Chubb is a top 3 running back. Like, that's the only, and I have 0 shares of Nick Chubb, 0, because he goes in round 2. Like, what am I going to do with that Nick Chubb is a top 3 running back in the NFL, but the Browns have made it very clear they're just not going to give him that workload. Even when Kareem Hunt was hurt last year, they put Dearness Johnson in as the passing down back. In those games where Kareem Hunt was out, Nick Chubb saw 0% of the long down and distance work. He saw 0% of the 2-minute offense. Like, they don't want him on the field at all when they're passing the football, and it's the same coaching staff. So it's just like, man, like, but that would be the one. Like, if Kareem Hunt got traded and Dearness Johnson got hurt, and then we're just dealing with Ford, the rookie out of Cincinnati, like, then you would make an argument that, Nick Chubb should be a late 1st round, early 2nd round pick. And man, I would love to see, I just want 1 year where Nick Chubb, like, where he gets the jailbreak, where he just gets to be the dude in the offense, has a really good offensive line. So anyway.
One last guy, and then we'll get out of here. This was supposed to be a half-hour show, folks. We're at 90 minutes already.
Oh, we knew this one would go longer.
How about I'm coining this receiver. I want to make sure everyone knows I'm creating this nickname before everyone else steals it. Fantasy Bitcoin. Michael Thomas was great 2 years ago. Now is worthless. 7th round ADP. What are you doing with Michael Thomas? There's rumors of him coming back. He's healthy. He's going to be back to being the man in this offense. He's got Jameis out there throwing him the rock. Thoughts on Michael Thomas? This is a guy who used to be a 1st, 2nd round pick.
Yeah. So Michael Thomas is a player that I have drafted a few times. On average, so his ADP is pick 79. On average, I have drafted him at pick 100. So when he falls well past ADP, I'm happy to gain exposure. Look, folks, this is a player that's demanded 28 and 30% target shares. So you still have to realize there is a bull case here for Michael Thomas. He could come back where you're getting him, if he comes back and he's like a 25% target share player, like you're getting a value. But he has a bull case scenario where he could still be a 30% dude. Yeah, he's older, but he's been hurt for 2 years. So like there's definite negatives, but unlike some of the other players we're dealing with, like the ADP, when he slides, it's fine. I never draft Michael Thomas at ADP. I never even draft him around ADP because I know every so many drafts, you're just going to land in a room where people are like, I'm not taking Michael Thomas. Mm-hmm. Like they just already have him etched off the board. And so that's the draft where you get Michael Thomas. Very similar to the way we're treating DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, those players. But like you can make an argument here, like this is a player, it's just the injury thing, right? We actually feel not great about his quarterback, but we've seen Jameis support fantasy players, receivers, before. So yeah, that's the way I'm handling Michael Thomas.
This has been a really good show. I mean, this is almost draft plan-esque in terms of really just Dwain kind of emptying the notebook. So go back and re-listen to this, folks. Share it with your friends. If you like the show, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review. This is really good stuff, Dwain. I think people are going to get a lot out of this episode. I appreciate you jumping on here and everybody for spending some time this holiday weekend. I know you probably are listening to this while the USFL championship game is on mute in the background.
Don't piss Ian off. Don't get Harditz going. Like, I get Harditz. The way to get Harditz going is if you say anything bad about the USFL or you mention any sort of week 17 correlation. Like, so if you guys want to go trigger Ian Harditz on Twitter, like just go at it.
Oh, I know. I hate the USFL and all these spring leagues, but I know it's content.
I actually like it. I don't keep up with it, but I just like football. And so if I can have football on, I'm good with it.
I'll tell you, I'm going to flip this on tonight. We're recording this Sunday morning, so I'll flip it on tonight because at least these are the two best teams in the league, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And the league's slowly gotten better as it's gone. Like, right. We're seeing, early on, like the passing numbers and things were just horrible, but anyway, yeah.
Yes. So, all right, folks, for Dwain, I am Drake. Enjoy your 4th of July. Come back and listen to us. Hopefully you still have all 10 fingers. And remember to never get out hustled.